Today's focus workshop topic is color coding DDM folder and item attributes. Trust that everybody is familiar with the DDM interface as you are all customers. And I've got a saved search at the top of my screen so I can look at my workshops. A quick recap: the first focus workshop was the category browser. Then we did access controls not as owner. We did importing via CSV file. Our last session was on the bulk editor and the CAD rename functionality. And today's topic is color coding attributes within the DDM database. So what I've done here is, let me just move this preview pane along. What I've done is I've created a series of actions to go through these in order. Now, the first one is folder action state. So my first example, and you can already see color coding on the screen. You see the status of these folders at the top. The blue ones are closed and the green one is active. Okay, so immediately we can see the benefit of having something that's very visual on the screen. I'm going to open this task. Well, it's in progress because we've started it. And I'm going to open the task. And what I've done here is I've created an example of each of the folder actions that we deliver out of the box with DDM. So the actions that we deliver out of the box are from milestones all the way through to number 10 opportunities. I have another example here, which is one that I've added as an extension for purchase requisitions. I'm sure everybody's already familiar with the fact that you're not limited to what we deliver out of the box. You can extend the system yourself. So that's a good example of that. But if I look at these sub-actions that I've created, you see that I've color-coded the status field. Now, the reason I've created all of them is for a milestone, in progress has a green background and a white text. Now, this is just the colors that I've set. Obviously, you can set your own colors based on your own preferences. So if it's not started, I have it gray. When it's in progress, I turn it to green, like so. And when it's completed, it turns to this blue color. With a requirement, if it's not started, again, it's grey. So not only have I color coded, but I've tried to be consistent and logical with my color coding across all action types. So for example, with a requirement, we might have defined it, but at the point when we've achieved the requirement, we turn it to the same color blue that basically says we're finished, it's done and it's good. So I'm looking for all blues to know that everything has been done. So I'm hoping everybody gets the logic on that. I've got a status there called waiting, but again, if this has been completed, it goes to blue. If an approval action goes to approved, that again is an end point and a close point, so we've done it blue. So I'm hoping that kind of makes sense. The exception to that is if we cancel something, we're highlighting it in red. So the ability to color code these attributes, I'm going to show you how we do that. So from the main DDM interface, I'm going to go into my administration client and I'm going to log in. And I'm going to go to folder types. And for example, let's go to tasks. I'm looking at the attributes for tasks and the state field is here. If I double click on the state or click on edit in the menu bar at the top here, so I'm going to double click on the label and that takes me into edit mode. So this is the edit dialog for the status. Now you'll see in the left hand panel here, we've got a tab here that says color rules. And now what I've done here is I've said so I've just given it a label and this rule name is only visible to the administrator, so it doesn't really matter what you call that. And the rule is if the field equals complete, we've set the background color to blue and we've set the font color to black. Okay. And likewise, we've added the rules for complete, in progress, not started, and waiting. If you were to add a new rule, You could say doesn't equal, is equal to, is not empty, etc., etc. There's all sort of different options you can use here, and we'll see a couple of examples of that later. Okay, so this is the area where you apply your color rules. There's no option for copying rules to other folder templates. You do have to create them one at a time. So if I come over there and save my definition, okay, so all I've done there is given you an example of setting for a task what these colors are for. Okay, so that's my first example of color coding attributes against a folder type object. And I've used status as my example. You can apply colors to any of the attributes. I'm going to close that because that example has now been completed. The next example I'm going to cover is folder and item attributes. If I open my folder, what we see here, now this is my purchase requisition that I mentioned. So this is an example of a folder action that is not out of the box, and I've created this because during a demonstration somebody said, can you do purchase requisitions? Well, yes. So I created a new folder type. I've given it a specific numbering. It has the standard description, but I've added fields like what is the product family, what is the project code, who's the supplier, what cost accounting does it get assigned to, etc. Now, this example is we've added a database level function for this field that calculates the items that I've put into my purchase requisition. So these are the items that I want to purchase, and I've added a folder link level attribute called quantity. So it's a bit like a bill of materials. And because my parts have got an attribute against them called price, this will times the price by 5. It will add all of these up together and give me this attribute at the top, 16,990. What I've done here is I've color coded the price attribute the same as the total cost attribute in terms of the background yellow sort of mustard color, just so that when I'm demonstrating I can clearly explain to people the relationship between those fields. My other example of a folder-based color-coded attribute is if you look at the available budget here, this now says £10,000. I've added a custom rule. So again, if I go to my folder types here and I go to my purchase requisition, if I look at the attributes, my available budget attribute has a color coding rule that says if my budget is greater than £5,000, turn it blue, but if my budget is less than or equal to £5,000, turn it red. Okay, so you know, an example of we've applied two rules on the same attribute, and therefore what that's giving me now inside here is if I edit this attribute, well, first I could just clear the value. If I start to type in 4,999, the font color stays red because it's equal or under 5,000. If I send this in at 896, you see it's still red until I get to the point where I've added the fourth digit, and as long as the fourth digit goes over 5,000, it now turns it blue. Okay, so that example is there are two rules. If your available budget is greater than 5,000, turn it blue. If your available budget is 5,000 or less, turn it red. My next example is in the comments field. And this does not necessarily make sense. I was just trying to come up with examples of how you can configure these attributes and the color coding. So if we look at the comments field in the admin tool, for my purchase requisitions. Again, I'm looking in the attributes and I want to go to the comments field. I've added a color rule that says to me, if this contains the word testing or is not empty, I want you to highlight in red. Okay. This condition can be an and or. So you've got the ability to say, if this is this and this, do this, or if this is this or this, do this. Okay. So if I come out there, we're also looking for the word testing. So when I come out of here, if the field, it doesn't make sense because if it's empty, you won't see the red text. So it's a nonsense thing. But what I've done is the example I've given is if I remove the word testing because it needs that word in there and I say OK, it's turned the text back to black because it's looking for, it's either empty and it must contain the word template. Was it template or test? Testing. Okay, so if I go back in and edit this and say testing, it's now turned red because it includes that word. Maybe what I should have done is if I go back into that, instead of changing the font color, attributes, comments, color rules, maybe instead of changing the font color, we should change the background color. Okay, and let's see what happens there. Confirm, confirm, confirm. Have I done it correctly? If I edit and I clear the field, no. So I wonder if I need to exit and come back in again. Okay, I'm guessing I've done the logic wrong. Okay, so color coding attributes, actions, folder, this one here, and it's not filled it in, but if I edit this and paste that in, it goes yellow, which is correct. That's right, it goes yellow. If I edit this and remove the word testing, it should go back to white, which it does, yes. Okay, so possibly they're not the best of examples, but just to point you in the right direction of where you can start to play around and try and build your own color coding. Okay, so that was the second example. I'm just going to, it's actually in a purchase requisition. What I should have done here is the purchase requisition also sits inside a workflow. So you can send it through the workflow. So I'm not going to change the status of this one. We're going to go on to our third example now, which is item attributes. If I open my task here, what I've done inside my folder here is I've got a series of parts in the folder, and I have a part attribute that is called spare. Is this part available as a spare part or not? So we see here that yes is green, no is like a salmon pink color, and not populated is yellow. So if I go to the administration tool and I go for attributes, because this is now a part or assembly attribute, and I look for the attribute that is spare, in my color rules I've got 3 rules. If this does not contain yes and doesn't contain no, yes or no, it's going to go yellow. If it contains yes, it will go green, and if it contains no, it will go salmon color. So if it equals no, simple rule, we say OK, and therefore if I say this is now available as a spare, it will turn green, and if this is not available as a spare. So these are color coding attributes against items, whereas the 2 previous examples were color coding attributes against folders and actions. And as you can also see here, I color code the status of my items and follow the same logic on the status. So if, for example, I wanted to change the status of this part, and I set the status to, sorry, we're on another screen, to checked and approved, I use a different color, so it's immediately identifiable. If I then change the status to released, that's interesting. I'm not logged in as a user who is allowed to release this item. However, so I'm going to cancel this. I'm going to go to my server machine where I am logged in as a user who can make this change for me. So I'm going to do this in the background. Bear with me just a second. I'm going to go into, okay, apologies. Let me just go into here. And I'm going to change the status of this to released. I've got another user to change the status for me. If I refresh the screen, we can see here that it's gone to my normal familiar blue color, which to me signifies this is good and this has been completed. Okay, so to recap, color coding attributes for folders, folder actions and items in the database, and the ability to have various sort of conditions and rules around that. I think it's a good feature, and I think it helps create visibility enhancements, and it highlights things that are important or things that relate to each other.